draft card story. This is a story about when I got arrested. And this is a picture of a draft card. And this is what caused all my trouble. In 1969, I was 18 years old. And like all the other boys that were 18 years old, I had to register for the draft. And we were issued draft cards. And the very next year, I went to college. And one thing I found out about going to college was the boys, some of the boys, the cool boys, were burning their draft cards. And lots of guys were, college boys anyway, were burning their draft cards. And the other thing I found out was that girls kind of liked boys who burned their draft cards. So that was like a revelation to me. You mean the jocks are not getting all the girls? The rebels are getting the girls? So I got an idea. I thought maybe it was too easy to burn your draft card. I mean, you show off for your friends and you burn your draft card, but, so what? Nobody knows except for a couple of your friends. So what I thought I would do was send my draft card back to my draft board. I tried to find a picture of a draft board, and this is all I could come up with. And I don't think that the guy who ran my draft card on my draft board looked like this old dude. But in my mind, he did. So I wrote him a letter explaining why I didn't approve of the war, and I refused to continue to carry around my draft card. And I told, girls about this, and, I'm not sure they believed me. I mean, it's kind of hard to prove you did anything like that. You didn't have any evidence. Well, it's wintertime, and I'm in my dorm room. I went to high school in Iowa, but I went to college, a little college in Seattle. And this is not really my dorm room, but it kind of looked like that, except you see how there's girls in this dorm room? Well, in my dorm room, there was never anybody but me and my roommate. And I don't know that any girls ever entered our room. We were challenged romantically, I think you could say. But one evening, there was a knock on the door, and my roommate, he jumps up and he answers the door, and there's two dudes out there with suits on. And they're FBI guys, and they're very courteous. They're very polite, and they asked my roommate, could he please, leave us alone? And they needed to talk to me. And he goes, yeah, oh, yes, sir. And away he goes. And the two FBI agents walk into my dorm room, and they sit on my roommate's bed, and they tell me that what I have done, sending my draft card back to my draft board, is a felony. And I can go to prison for 5 years if convicted, and I can be fined $5,000. Do I want to listen? All you got to do, kid, is enlist in any of the branches of the armed forces, and this whole thing will go away. But you are looking at a felony. And I said no. No, I'm not going to change my mind. And they thanked me, and I took some notes, and away they went. And little did I know, but while this all went on, my roommate was running up and down the corridor, knocking on doors and telling people, the FBI is talking to Gary, the FBI is talking to Gary. And so when I came out, I was kind of famous, at least in Seattle. Well, at my college. Well, really, probably, at my door. Okay, in my dorm, at least, I was kind of famous for a while there. But really, nothing much happened. Time passed, and a month passed, 2 months passed. It's spring, and the FBI came to talk to me, and that was that. Apparently, nobody else ever showed up. And so one day I was in a history class, and a girl comes, and she says she's from the Dean of Students office, and that I should go to the Dean of Students office because I have an important phone call. This is, of course, long before cell phones or anything like that. So I go to the administration building and I find the dean of students office, and I go in there, and he tells me it's an emergency, it's some kind of family emergency. I have to call my uncle, and he gives me a piece of paper, and there's a phone number written on the piece of paper, and he's so kind that he says he'll give me some privacy, so he leaves his own office so I can make a phone call using his phone. Except I'm staring at this phone number because my uncle doesn't live very far away. He lives just south of Seattle, and I would go visit him every now and then. I would call him up every now and then, and I know this is not my uncle's phone number. And right there, there's a Seattle phone book. This big fat thing here is the Seattle phone book, and I don't know what, maybe 500,000 people live in Seattle. There's just a lot of names, and I open up that phone book and I look up the United States government, and there's a whole lot of phone numbers, and I run my finger down the list of phone numbers, and I find it. I find that phone number, and it belongs not to my uncle, but to the U.S. Marshal's office. And oh man, I called that number. And I pretty soon they've got me connected to a guy. I'm going to call him Bob. And Bob he's a U.S. Marshal, but he's like the friendly. This is not Bob, of course, but I mean, he seems like this, like a big friendly guy. And it turns out years ago he went to my little college. He's an alum of my little college, and he's calling me up to tell me he has to arrest me. He's going to have to arrest me the next morning, and he thinks. And the reason he's calling me up, I mean, I don't think he should be calling me up. It's probably completely against procedure for him to be calling me up and telling me he's going to be arrested. But he can't believe anybody from my little college, a little church college, kid, you can't really be bad, not for a thing like this. But tomorrow morning, bright and early, we will be there. So you better be ready. And I promise him, I will be there. And I come out of there, and a bunch of my friends are out on the lawn, and I tell them what has happened. I have to tell like two people, and man, the rumor. This is not really what happened, but it felt like this. It was like there was 10 people there, and then there was 20 people, and then there was like 40 people, and everybody was, oh my God, Gary's going to be arrested tomorrow morning. And I mean, the news went all over the college, and I finally got home that night, and my whole living room was full of, college, angry, upset. Um, there was that night. This pretty girl spent the entire night with me, and that was the first time that ever happened. I didn't really get a lot of sleep. I was all revved up. And sure enough, next morning there was a knock on the door, and this is like a SWAT team. This is not at all what really happened. It was Bob and this other guy, and they're wearing suits, and the other guy wants to cuff me. Can I cuff him? And Bob says no, for God's sake, And so they take me out to their car, and they stick me in the back seat, and Bob's just about ready to drive away, and also there's this like blood curdling scream. You remember that girl? She is like on the porch, like half dressed, and she's furious, and she's screaming, "You motherfuckers! You motherfuckers!" And Bob slams on the brake, and I go, "No, she's upset. Just let's keep going. Just keep going." And that was like one of the most beautiful moments of my whole life. That pretty girl yelling "motherfuckers." It's to this day it has kind of a musical, happy feeling for me. That word. They drove me to this place. It's the federal courthouse in Seattle, and they stuck me in one of these. They're called holding cells until the magistrate could find some time to talk to me. Apparently, and I'm in there for, I don't know, an hour or two, and there's absolutely nothing to do in these little rooms. I really got a good look at the walls, and I noticed if you got really, really close to the walls, you could see like initials, or like Joe, or guys that I think maybe use their fingernails to, you got to leave your mark, I guess. Well, finally, I went to see the magistrate, and He told me charges could still be dropped, but I had to enlist either in the Army or the Marine Corps. Apparently, at that point, both the Air Force and the Navy were too good for the likes of me, and I said no, 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 thank you. I'm gonna go through with this. And so he set my bail. I think it's $500. It turned out you don't really have to pay the whole bail. I think I only had to pay $50, like 10% of it, and I was loose. And we're back to see my friends, and there were parties, and I had to go back to Iowa. My draft board was in Iowa, and so I was going to have to go to the federal courthouse in Iowa. So I hitchhiked home. It's an enormous country. If you drive across it, if you hitchhike across, especially the western half of it, it seems so much of it is so empty and so beautiful. I don't know, it took me a day or two. I got dropped off in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I was still maybe 100 miles away from home, and it was raining. It was I don't know, midnight maybe, and misty rain kind of falling, and nobody would stop. There wasn't a lot of traffic on the road. These semis, guys would see me and honk at me, and splash me, And I was at the edge of town, and I noticed this old car graveyard. And so I thought, well, maybe I can at least get out of the rain. So I went over there, and I found a big old car with a big old back seat, and I climbed in there, and I fell asleep. And I woke up, it was still dark, and the rain had stopped, and sky had cleared, and all these stars had come out. It seemed like hundreds and hundreds of stars, and I felt, I don't even know how to describe the feeling. I was alone, and no one knew where I was. No one who knew me knew where I was. I went home to my mother and my father. This is my mother and my father. I'm the little boy over there on the left of the picture. And of course, I was 19 at this point, but I think to my mom and dad, I was still that cute little boy. And man, they didn't know what to think of this. Their oldest son was going to go to prison for something like this. And my dad, I remember he told me he'd been in the Army, but he'd never been in prison. He said he didn't really know how to advise me. And I don't know, after a week or so, my mom and I drove down to this place. This is the federal courthouse in Cedar Rapids. The same place where I spent the night in the old car is where the courthouse, the federal courthouse is for the whole district. And I met my lawyer. I didn't have any money, so I had a court-appointed lawyer, and he turned out to be a Republican. And he liked the war. He supported the war, and he didn't like people like me who were anti-war. And he didn't like having to defend me. Well, he had been ordered to do it, I guess. And he said there was no way I was going to get away with this. I had obviously sent in my draft cards. They had a letter that I had written. I had talked to the FBI. I talked to the magistrate in Seattle. What was he supposed to do? Obviously, I was going to go to prison. He made my mom cry. Man, he told her all these horrible stories about what was going to happen to me in prison. This would be like my roommate would look like this guy, and I'd be raped. I'd probably happen the first night. He told my mother, and you can imagine my mom's emotional condition listening to all this stuff. We had the arraignment. This is not exactly the same court, but it's kind of similar. You can see the accused guy there is wearing crappy clothes, and that was me. I was wearing blue jeans and a sweatshirt or something. And of course, all the lawyers and everybody's wearing suits. And the judge, as I recall, the judge was like higher up. He's like looking down at us. And the judge, how does the defendant plead? And I yelled innocent. And it turned out I was not even allowed to speak. Only my lawyer could speak on my behalf, and he said not guilty. He entered a plea of not guilty. It turns out in the American judicial system, no one is innocent. The best you can hope for is to be not guilty. So I was fingerprinted and took my mug shot, and we drove home, and this is what my mom looked like. All the way home, I would look over at her, and she wasn't sobbing, but these tears were running down her face. And I had 3 weeks. I was surprised. I thought maybe it would take longer to, to finally have the trial, but the judge had set the trial and it was only 3 weeks away. And I was trying to be cool. I had some friends. I had some friends there in Waterloo where I lived, and but they were they were like blue collar guys. They didn't have college deferments, and they thought I was crazy. I mean, you're going to go to prison for something like this. And I'm trying to be cool, but I felt I'm going to go to prison. I'm I'm going to prison. I'm 19 years old, and I'm going to go to prison. The day before my trial, I'm eating breakfast, and the phone rings, and my mom hands it to me, and it's my lawyer, and he's angry. He's apparently just got out of bed, and he'd got a phone call, and it turns out the charges are dismissed. The other side, the prosecutor is dismissing the charger. This is Curly Holtman. He was the U.S. attorney, and he had not been handling the case. It was just a dinky case, I guess. So one of his underlings had been handling it. But it had finally arrived at his desk, and he was looking at it, and he thought, wow, we're sending this kid to prison just for sending his draft card back to his draft board? Is that, oh, yeah, it's a felony. And he was just, have we ever done this? No, no, well, no, we never did it before. So he got on the phone and he started calling up U.S. attorneys all around the country. And it turned out none of them had sent anybody to prison for that. A college kid? We're sending a college kid? And he decided he was not going to be the first U.S. attorney to send a kid to prison for that particular crime. So he dropped the charges. And it made my lawyer mad. He actually wanted me to go to prison. And I didn't care. I didn't care what my lawyer thought. I was free. I was not going to go to, I don't even know how to describe the feeling of happiness and relief when I got that phone call. Sometimes you do a crazy thing, a wild, reckless, brave thing, and you get away with it. And sometimes it turns out the cops that arrest you are nice guys, and the lawyer who defends you is an asshole. Life is full of surprises. Thank you.